Allison's going to review the project from a high level, and then we're going to have time for some questions and answers. Nancy's going to kind of monitor the chat box. So if you have questions as we go, just put them there. We'll make sure and try and get to them. I don't think it's going to take a huge amount of time today. We've got an hour booked off, but really just wanted to take this opportunity to explain the project a little more, and I think from our perspective, so you can understand as from an economic development standpoint, how you can get involved and how you can help promote this to businesses in your community. And so it's a win-win for everyone. So I'm going to just turn it over to Allison, and you can tell us about the project.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Leanne. And thank you everyone for joining the presentation today. We're really excited to be able to launch this pilot. We've been working with all different levels of government really since March or April on how we could sorry, I just see my slides are not on the first one. How we could really address some of the issues that were going on in the Ukraine. So I'm going to walk you through the pilot today. We've left ample amount of time for questions. And then after questions, I'm going to leave the last 5 minutes and talk about not just the pilot, but then where we envision the project going itself. So big thank you to the EDA for being a leader in across Canada on launching a project like this. And yeah, just really excited to be working with you and your membership. So what is the project? It's a pilot project, and it's led by the Economic Developers of Alberta and Saskatchewan, or sorry, and Succession Matching to match Alberta businesses to investors. And so one thing that I want to mention is we're really lucky to have Cassiar Partners, the private equity group that is the investor on this project, on the line today. And so just keep that in mind. Maybe during the question period, we'll invite them to say kind of an overview of their firm and answer your questions on that end. So for the goals of this project, I was talking to Ryan Moore from Thunder Bay CDDC yesterday. And for those of you I haven't had an opportunity to meet yet, I have a background in economic development. And so we were looking at how this project could potentially help their community as we roll out in January in Ontario. The Community Futures in Ontario just got some funding from FedNor to implement some investment attraction. So we'll be working with them on that. And Ryan was talking about a conversation he was having with a business owner in his community last week. And the individual owns a business in the trades and employs 8 or 9 people in the community. And he thinks that selling his business is just so complicated. He's just going to shut it down and sell off the building. And so I think a lot of us are seeing this in our communities, and we want to really help individuals understand the process of selling the business and help retain some of those businesses. Investment attraction is also a huge component of this. This is a very unique way to bring in outside dollars to your community, especially in the rural centers. And then when I was working in economic development in Moose Jaw, one of our larger businesses, the pork packing plant, ended up shutting down. It had a huge impact on just like losing that industry. And this is an investment attraction that can also work for those medium and large size employers in your communities. And then I think a lot of us feel called to help the displaced persons from the Ukraine. And so talk about how this is specifically focused during the pilot on helping some of those individuals. So some background for you. In 2019, we partnered with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And last year we reapproached them and said, hey, you guys are industry leaders in studying different topics like succession. We really want to know how the pandemic's impacted businesses and what their plans are to sell their business. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of the stats and where some of the biggest differences are from their 2018 report and the report that's going to be released on January 11th. So in 2018, as this slide shows, it was 72% of businesses wanted to sell in the next 10 years. And now 76% of businesses want to sell. The thing that scares me the most, though, is you can see that line where 15% of them want to sell in the next 12 months. So think about your own main streets, and say you have employers that have 8 or 9 employees. What happens if 15% of those individuals shut down because they can't find a buyer in the next year? It's going to have huge implications to our communities. And so that's one of the friction points that this pilot's trying to solve for. The next one is the labor shortage. So we work with a number of different private equity groups and family offices, and we have a deal right now. We're trying to do a roll up with 11 HVAC companies and cleaning companies. And 2 of the 3 investors that we introduced this company to have passed because they're concerned that they won't be able to find skilled labor for all of these businesses. And so it's a huge, it's probably the biggest barrier for any of the investors looking at businesses right now. And I'm sure you're seeing the skilled labor shortage issue in your own communities as well. Alberta is also leading the country in the number of displaced Ukrainians that have been accepted. And what we plan to address in this pilot is making sure that they're not just set up personally, but also being able to find fulfilling, meaningful careers as well. And so a little bit of background, Succession Matching itself, think of us as online dating for buying and selling businesses. We bring together a community approach and try to make the transitions fair for the buyer, the seller, and the community. One of the unique things about our matching services is we don't actually charge commission on the sell side. And so this is, we're able to help a lot of family transitions and employee share ownership plans. We've been operating now since 2012 and have really expanded across the country. On January 11th, we'll be launching our big campaign with the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, and they'll be going out to 95,000 businesses across the country to sign up for the site. And some other background during the pandemic for us, it really pivoted our buy side of that. Up until the pandemic, we primarily worked with banks. I often joke that we have more pilots than Air Canada because we really believe in collaborating with different organizations. And our first pilot that we launched back in 2012 was with RBC. And so we've been able to drive a lot of individuals to banks to borrow capital to purchase businesses. During the pandemic, capital completely dried up. And so we pivoted our business model and started signing up what we call investor buyers. And these are individuals that have cash to deploy. So between our 62 investor buyers on the site right now, there's $500 million worth of capital looking to purchase businesses from the platform. And so bringing all of these different complex friction points together, we're offering a streamlined solution. And so what we're looking to do is find business owners that are looking to sell to investors. Once the business is sold to the investors, and Cassiar can also talk to that a little bit later on, they're going to employ displaced Ukrainians to look or work locally in the business. And then part of their compensation package in working at the business is they're going to earn equity into the business. And so this will set them up as a long-term partner in the business alongside Cassiar, and will give them a long-term viable career. And in your local communities, you'll have an owner operator. And we wanted to break that down into steps just to clearly communicate it. And so Succession Matching, we're going to work with the businesses to vet them for this program and make sure that they're ready to start talking to buyers, match them to the investment capital, and then work with Cassiar and some of our other investor partners on screening for some of the Ukrainian workers that would work well in that business. And then where you come in from a local economic development perspective is we really want to have that touch point. And so once the displaced Ukrainian family arrives, being able to help them with local resources and set them up personally on that side as well. And then long-term going forward, again, the Ukrainian workers will vest into the business, giving them a long-term place to stay and work within the Canadian economy. So what's a what if the business isn't ready to sell? So one of the biggest issues that we find is a lot of people wait too long before they want to sell their business, and they don't actually have anything in order to transition the business. And so we launched the formal succession planning program through a project with Community Futures Manitoba. We tested it out, and then we've implemented it over the last year. I'm really happy to report that everyone that's taken the program and answered our survey afterwards gave us a net promoter score of 100%. So what this means is everyone that's taking our program says 100% other business owners their size should participate in a formal succession plan. And so we break that down into 7 different one-on-one sessions. They receive 13 hours of administration report. They get a discounted cash flow analysis, which gives them a good idea of what their present net value of the business is. So they know approximately how much they can sell it for. They get a sell book, a pitch deck, and everything that they need to hand off to a potential buyer in order to start the due diligence process. And then they've also worked with our team on understanding their negotiation points for going into some of those conversations. And so it's been really beneficial to the business owners that went through. The business owners that we're looking to work with specifically through this pilot program are individuals that want to sell between 1 and 5 years. And the reason why this is really important too is because we believe in the power of mentorship. And so if those business owners can stay on and mentor the displaced Ukrainians on different parts of the business, that will help them set them up for success even more. And so we're looking for businesses that have an enterprise value between 2 and 20 million with a minimum profit of 200,000 per year. And so this is just to make sure that some of the loan payments and a living wage for the displaced Ukrainian family is also viable in the cash flow. A business with 4 employees or more, and it doesn't really matter which industry it's in, but the only restriction is if it requires some sort of provincial accreditation. So for example, to own a dental office in a province, you have to have a dental license from the provincial association. So businesses like that are a little bit more difficult. So and then also in a community where economic development or business organizations can help transition the Ukrainian people and integrate them successfully into the community. We've been getting a lot of questions about this pilot project, and so I think it's equally as important to walk through what this pilot is not. And so this is not an immigration program. These individuals will not be brought in through the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program. For those of you who are familiar with the different streams, this has just been renamed from the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program. This is not a solution for a business that wants to sort of like a fire sale and sell within the next 6 months. Again, that mentorship piece is really important. So we're hoping that the business owners can stay on and mentor the displaced Ukrainians. And we don't want to compete with the Immigration Settlement Services or any agencies like that. We believe in collaborating with different groups together. And so your job as an economic development officer is going to be pointing out those different resources that are in the community that they can tap into. We're not looking to provide the exact same services as those organizations. And another thing that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes after questions is this is also not a way of bringing in people from outside of Canada through the Foreign Skilled Workers Program. Alberta currently doesn't participate in the EMPP. And so this is specifically for Ukrainians that have already landed in Canada to participate, not individuals that are still looking at leaving some of the short-term camps and things like that. So just going to open it up for questions. I know that's a lot of information at once, but would love to hear questions or feedback or ideas.
Thanks,
Very good.
Allison.
Oh, sorry.
Nancy's going to just kind of facilitate the Q&A. So if you've got questions, please put them in the chat box to make sure we can get to them.
Yeah, there's a question that's that stated, can you speak to what is deemed to be a living wage under the program?
I think that's really it like cover the healthy wage, or like a living wage is more of like is enough money to make to live and work in the community that the business is in.
So rather than a dollar figure, is it more that the business will kind of make that determination just based on the cost of living in the area?
Correct. And so it's very similar to if you're onboarding, say, a general manager to a business, whatever a local compensation would be to bring on a similar position so that someone could afford living in that area.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, here's one. What is the cost to the seller for this program, both if they get accepted into the pilot or they just partake in your succession planning program?
That's a really great question. And so depending on what area of the province the seller is located in. So for example, we were working with a number of different regions and then the community futures as well in Southern Alberta that purchased coupon code vouchers to access our site. So businesses so we retail a matching service on our site as $2,000 to list the business on the site. And then our formal succession plan program is $5,000 plus 1 year free on the membership. And so in some parts of Southern Alberta, they can access our site for 3 years for $25 through the sponsorship of Community Futures. But for sellers looking to participate, it's $2,000 to enter the marketplace and $5,000 for the formal succession plan and a site membership.
Is the hiring of the displaced Ukrainian workers contracted or tied into the sale agreement?
That's actually a really good question for Cassiar. I don't believe so, but maybe this is a good excuse to introduce Garrett and Achel from Cassiar Partners on the call as well.
Yeah, it's nice to meet everybody. Thanks everybody for taking the time for this. By way of background, we are an investment firm that happens to be made up of a group of individuals that all grew up in small-ish towns in Western Canada. Chell is the one, actually one of two individuals on a team that's from Alberta, the booming metropolis of Rosebud, Alberta, which if I'm correct, you can count the population of Rosebud on, I think, your fingers and toes. Our mandate for the last 2 years has been to buy and transition good, stable, small businesses in Canada into the next generation of ownership, most commonly buying from retiring founder, owner, operators. As we were coming to the development of this strategy and putting together the ducks on our side, we were seeing similar data to what Allison was seeing, which is feedback that small communities will be disproportionately impacted by the sort of forthcoming succession crisis, and without folks stepping up to bridge the gap of ownership of these businesses and transition them, a good chunk of the sort of like core economy in small communities have the potential to be impacted. So we got really excited about this program. We're going to be out buying businesses in any case, but to be able to do it in a framework that provides positive impact to communities like the communities that we grew up in, to do it while providing gainful employment to immigrants who otherwise would have a more difficult time finding employment that takes advantage of their prior skill sets in their respective countries. We got really excited about this program. Can you, Nancy, would you mind reminding me the core question?
Was it the cost? Yes, it was the cost to the seller, both if they get accepted into the pilot or they just partake in the succession planning.
Sorry, I'm going to jump in. I believe the question, Garrett, was, are you going to tie employing the displaced Ukrainian in the purchase agreement?
It doesn't. The employment contract typically wouldn't sit in the purchase agreement. And there's a timing question there where one of the harder parts about acquisitions transactions is timing various work streams to land together. When Allison first engaged a potential seller, there is no immigrant selected. There's no immigrant identified. We simply have a business owner who's looking to transition. At that point, you're funding the capital, you're putting together the purchase agreement, you're going through diligence on the business, etc. And at that point, we are looking for an immigrant. We are yet to do the first acquisition under this strategy with a skilled Ukrainian immigrant. In an ideal world, we have that person identified and there's an employment agreement in place with the company, and there's a commitment to transition equity to that individual if they work out in the company. They are contracted agreements. They do not sit in the purchase agreement, but they are, in an ideal world, are part of the transaction. And in a best case scenario for us, for other capital providers, I think to all folks in this program, we have that individual and the family identified before the finalization of the purchase of the company.
Okay, in terms of roles then, a question that we have is, do you see us, meaning economic developers, people in this space, as primarily identifying businesses that are looking to sell, or as ongoing support to the workers? And also, is it exclusively Ukrainian workers?
I can field that one. And so our call to action today is getting the word out about this program. And so what we need to do is look for business owners that want to participate. As local economic development professionals, you know your communities better than anyone else. And so we're hoping to be able to tap into that network effect to be able to drive businesses to this program. And then we would also be interested in collaborating with you after there's a successful sale and the family arrives on helping them be aware of what landing services are available. And so probably a lot of the things that already known to your office that could be shared with individuals, but our primary ask is in the search for the businesses that we could sell through this service. And then right now we are focused on exclusively for Ukrainian workers. And then after the question period, I'm going to talk about how we're going to expand this program, but we're definitely interested in working with displaced persons from around the world. Right now there's 8.9 million displaced persons, but I'll talk about some of the policy changes that need to happen in the province of Alberta before we can expand out even further.
And a follow-up to the support, who is paying for the services and what is the cost? That was the follow-up question.
Paying for the services as in our website services from the sell side, or?
Well, Jordan, maybe you can clarify as you were the one who asked the question.
Sure, I guess everything end to end, because obviously you guys are, you mentioned earlier, running through profitability analysis and identifying folks to do the next stages. So when we pitch it to businesses, are we expecting that they're paying you guys, or is this coming through a program? How does this all work?
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification. So the cost that's incurred by the business is there's a $2,000 subscription, and that's the only fee that they would pay us for the matching. There's no commission on the sale of the business. And so our revenue model is we do charge a buy side commission. So we charge our investor buyers a finder's fee on that side of things. But to the business owners in your community, there would be a $2,000 membership fee.
Yeah. And then the only other piece I'd add to that is with the process of the sale and the acquisition, there's going to be legal costs on both sides. There's going to be accounting costs on both sides. Most typically, we as the buyer would cover our costs and the seller would be expected to cover theirs. The costs are relatively reasonable for something of this size. Like the small businesses, you're probably looking at somewhere between $10,000 and $70,000 in fees, depending on the size and the complexity of the business. But there is an aspect that has to be borne by the sellers, and the portion that's borne by the buyers, as I said, is borne by the buyers.
That's a really great note, Garrett. Thank you.
There's a follow-up question as it relates to the living wage. Is it anticipated to support one person or a family of 4, for example? Any indication, any idea?
So this wouldn't be any different than applying for any other job. So a family, say if it was a family of 4 people, they may not look at, so like the job will be published with the expected salary, and individuals would make their own individual decision on if it's enough money to support themselves and then also their family as well. And so it'd be similar to open jobs on the market.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too. The goal, I think it's more of a, what's the goal of the living wage, before answering the sort of like what's the actual dollar figure of the living wage. The goal for us is to attract immigrant workers into communities where these businesses most commonly exist, and to feel comfortable continue working in these companies and managing these companies into the future. So if they're not paid enough, I think it's quite common that immigrants land somewhere in Canada, spend a few years there, and then look to immigrant to one of the bigger cities. We want to incentivize people to live great lives, to be well paid in smaller communities. The living wage, it's not a set dollar figure, depending on where you are, depending on the size of the business, depending on the education and professional credentials of the individual going to business will determine the pay rate. The goal is to pay people enough that they don't see this as, I'll take this job as a way into Canada. They view it as a good opportunity for themselves in a new country that they can build on. And the equity piece that Allison spoke about is a piece that we're really excited about this. We have the opportunity to transition up to a certain percent of ownership to the immigrants over time. And so for us, we would look at this program in 10 years and feel really good about it if we have a bunch of very, very well-paid immigrants running good small businesses in a bunch of communities across Canada, and those businesses have continued to support the economies in those communities. And so the equity is one way to do it. Fair wages is another. There is a reasonability factor where if we gave somebody $400,000 to run these companies, there'd be no money to pay the bills. So there is a reasonability factor that has to play into it, but the point is to find companies that can support healthy salaries, figure out what appropriate salary would be based on a jurisdiction, and then try to match the right immigrant who feels comfortable and excited about stepping into that opportunity. It's not a perfect answer, it's a bit of an abstract answer, but maybe the best way to say it is it's situational dependent with a leaning towards being overly generous to immigrants.
And in terms of resources that you all can use to approach businesses, there's a question about social media graphics and marketing material and so on. Everything's on our website. So we have a Match Factor section of our website, and what we can do is create a button on our homepage so it's easy for you to go to the section on our website. And yeah, there's social media graphic. We can, it will direct people to the Succession Matching website, and that takes you to all of the information that the businesses need.
Nancy, you and Chelsea are a really good team. She just posted that link in the chat while you're giving the sales pitch on it.
We're organized, Chelsea and I. I'm not seeing any other questions. Anything else?
I think just so everyone knows too, we have been talking about this project for a while, and we had originally pitched a much larger project, but we haven't yet secured any partners that we have been talking to. We still are nurturing those potential partners, but honestly, our board has taken a bold decision. Eleanor, our president's on the line here, and they just said, we want to get moving. This is really important, and we need to do this. And whether let's just do it as a pilot then first, and let's hope that in doing so, it's obvious the demand is there. We had this many of you sign up on a very short period of time. We know it's an issue. We know this could be a potentially very impactful project, and we are planning to look at, securing some additional funds and resources to take this further, because, 10 businesses, that's not that many when you think of the size of our communities and the number of businesses seriously thinking about this. We definitely want to make an impact, and let's start small, but the goal is to roll this out much larger.
Eleanor, your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to acknowledge the incredible amount of work that has gone into developing this program. So thank you to Natalie and Kent and Leanne and Nancy and Allison for all the back end hustle here that has brought us to today. And it's great to see some of the potential provincial partners here as well, listening into this program, we've addressed of how we're going to, potentially find the businesses. How are we finding the buyers? How are we, what is the process of, people that might be interested in new immigrants or that might be interested in being the person to run that business?
Thank you very much for your question. So to clarify, there's kind of 3 steps to this. So looking for the business owners, matching them to the buyers that are already on the Succession Matching site. So like I mentioned, during the pandemic, we pivoted a lot of our business models to work with private equity firms and family offices. Everything that we do, because of where our business came from, has a very economic development approach. So we've vetted all of our investor buyers, including Cassiar, to make sure that they want to set up transitions that are fair for the buyer, the seller, and the community. And so we've vetted the investors that will be purchasing the businesses for capital to deploy, and also similar missions and visions. And then on the 3rd stage of it, we've partnered with another organization called Skilled Jobs. And so if any of you do have displaced Ukrainians in your communities that are looking for employment, you can I can post the link in the chat box, and they can just sign up for free as an employee looking for the business. The Succession Matching teams working with Skilled and has taken on the responsibility of vetting the individuals that sign up through Skilled and matching them directly to the business opportunities that we're seeing as well. So we're working very closely between our different groups. So we've got a lot of really cool partners behind us, and Succession Matching is kind of the hub of the wheel, and just making sure that it runs smoothly that way.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison.
So we have another question from Troy. In any markets, are you noticing any disparity in the number of buyers versus the enterprise inventory for sale? This is one of my favorite questions after the pandemic to talk about, because a lot of people wonder, where do you find your buyers from? So we've been operating for 11 years now in Canada, and up until about 2019, beginning of 2020, we had 52% of the people that signed up for our website were buyers and 48% were sellers. During the pandemic, we saw 5 times as many buyers as sellers. And so if there's a message that you can take back to the sellers in your community, is for whatever reason, there's this misconception that there's no buyers out there. But we've got the data to show that there are so many buyers looking for good businesses. And so in my 11-year career working in this space, in my opinion, there's never been a better time to look to sell your business. So I think that's super encouraging as well for the business owners in your community. I think too often the news gets a little bit doom and gloom about where the economy is going. And right now is a great time for them to look at this. And I just got a prompt to also talk about where the project's going. So we're really excited about that as well. So I'm just going to share my screen again real quickly and talk about what this looks like post-pilot as well. And so where we're at today is we're looking for 10 businesses to run through this pilot project. And we have a lot of faith in the EDA network to be able to really set this up for success. And then after the pilot, we're waiting to hear back from some of those funding partners. I know we've got a number of applications in. So if anyone has any relationships with those departments, we'd love to connect with them again and see how we can move this forward. We're looking at an April 1st start for the overall project. And so funding's one of the biggest barriers to moving it out to the level that we'd like it to be at, that Leanne was talking about. And the second thing that we're waiting on is in September, the government of Alberta was going to announce the EMPP program. So what this is the federal government of Canada has different immigration programs, and then the provinces can stand up and say, oh, I want to participate in this one, this is our criteria that we're going to have, and they work with IRCC to make sure that their programs are run properly that way. So we're waiting on the government of Alberta to put up their hand and say that they want to bring in skilled workers through the EMPP program. That will unlock the ability for us to work with Talent Beyond Boundaries, which is an organization. It's a nonprofit out of the US, but has a very strong Canadian arm. It's run by Laura Dyer. Many of you on this call probably know her from her days at Western Diversification and IRCC. And so they have an inventory of over 62,000 displaced persons from different conflict zones that are looking for employment. And so we'll be able to tap into that stream once the EMPP is possible through the provincial government. And then we also work with Fragoman, which is the largest immigration firm in the world. And so they've got a lot of different connections. The managing partner of Fragoman Canada, we're really lucky to have on this pilot project team. His name is Dr. David Crawford, and he's actually the current sitting committee chair for the Displaced Persons Committee at the United Nations. And so he really said that this program has the potential of changing the way that people immigrate. And I'm just really proud to be working alongside the EDA on being a first in the world to roll out something like this. And so we really want to set up a success story and foresee working on this project with the EDA for the next 10 years. So thanks again.
Okay, I didn't know I was working with you for 10 years on this. That's news to me. Awesome. Honestly, like when we started talking about this, I thought this is such a win-win for everybody. It gives me goosebumps thinking about the impact we can actually make on so many fronts. So, Allison, Kent, Eleanor, Natalie, Nancy, like all those have been involved. Thank you. I know we're very excited to see where this can go. We do need each of you that are on the call to help us identify these businesses. It's not for everyone. There is criteria, but there's a lot in that criteria. A lot of businesses that are operating in that space. So if you know of businesses in your community that fit that criteria, please share the information with them. If you've got networks, you got chambers in your community, you got other types of groups, share that information, have them ripple effect it out. Because the more people that know about it, the more qualified and businesses will get, and the more success. So I don't know are there any more questions before we, Natalie? I see you're off mute.
I'm super excited about this program because initially when we worked in Southern Alberta, especially in rural communities, the gap between finding employees to not only attract them to the community, but retain them after they came to the community, as well as the entrepreneur piece of being able to own equity in properties. The number of companies that were signed up in Southern Alberta, we got very, very positive reviews about the program, all the assets, Allison's team that supports them through the process, all the material online. And in the past, in my life, I had never thought of succession planning at all. I hadn't looked at it very much, but seeing the numbers change, especially because of the pandemic, put me into a panic as to how many businesses we were going to lose, and people aren't aware that they can't sell domestically or reach a bigger market. So I'm super stoked about the program, about the opportunities to reach out to larger markets for some of our local business owners.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie, and thanks for your work on this. Lisa, I see you've got your hand up. Lisa Houle.
Thanks, Leanne. So I guess I have I am somewhat not clear on, you have buyers who are working with the investors coming in and actually purchasing a business in a rural community and accessing a pool of Ukrainian immigrants as the workers. So I'm right. So far that information is correct.
So to make it very, very clear, we have business owners that we match to buyers, and so the investors are the buyers. So yeah, buyers and sellers.
Okay, so you have different buyers coming in and purchasing a business. So are these buyers coming in with an exit strategy, or are they expecting that they're going to go in and own this business for 10, 15, 20 years? Or are they looking at it in a more short term? And maybe some of them are looking short term, maybe some of them are looking long term. But when I'm thinking about the immigrant coming in, and yes, I understand that they are buying an equity and gaining equity in that business, so they are becoming an owner. Is it ever going to be enough that they will be able to take over the business, or are they simply going to be a long-term employee earning a living wage? Like, where do they get to move up? That's my question.
So there's a couple of things in there that I just want to clarify real quickly. One thing that we get asked often is, what's the capital requirement for the displaced Ukrainian? And so there is no capital requirement for them to buy into the business. It's earned equity through it. And then the vision of the program is to be a long-term partner with the business owner. So they'll be partnered alongside the investment firm. And so, Garrett, is there anything else from your end that you'd like to add on to that?
No, I'd say the same thing. Like there's limitations. Like say you go buy a $10 million company, we are going to spend probably $300,000 to $400,000 in transaction expenses just to facilitate the acquisition, and then we're going to put up a certain amount of cash to fill in the equity on the transaction, and the bank's providing a good slug of capital for the debt. It wouldn't be feasible to transition ownership fully to an immigrant. Like the people that are providing the capital do have to make a return for this to be a continuously viable program that we can build on. The immigrants will be transitioned ownership in the business, and it should be, some of these businesses will do great. Some of these businesses will do okay. That's the reality of this world. Is subject to a business doing well, the immigrants should be able to provide a very nice nest egg for themselves and their family through the equity position. That doesn't mean an immigrant needs to own 100% of the business. We commonly don't own 100% of our businesses, but we still feel like we have the right incentive to build and grow the businesses, to contribute to ongoing operations of the company, and to know that for those contributions, we're going to be rewarded comfortably on a monetary basis. So that's the kind of the long-winded answer to that is it's not likely that we will transition full ownership of these companies to immigrants, certainly not for the first 5 years. And part of that, not just the fact that immigrants commonly don't have cash to purchase companies with as they're coming across, but also we are making representations to lenders, and there's real dollars on the line, and we want to make sure that we can be in charge of these investments and steward them through a period of paying off the debt on the companies. And there's an aspect of this where some of these immigrants, we hope that we can do a good job matching these immigrants, and a bunch of them will work out. From time to time, we will put the wrong immigrant into a situation where maybe their skill set's not the right fit. Maybe Northern Winnipeg is not the right fit from somebody coming from a warm climate. Whatever the dynamic, sometimes it won't work out. And by us retaining control of the investment, we can make sure that we can make changes, put the right team in, govern the companies for long-term success, while recognizing the fact that there will be some uncertainty with putting individuals into the companies. So the goals on our side is reward people comfortably, give them good incentives to work hard and to grow these businesses, and make sure that they can provide a very comfortable life for their families inside of a structure that protects the parties putting up the capital.
I think the other side of it is, we all know every business is different. So that's
Yeah.
why, you know, having something like Allison with your team behind the scenes, being able to do the due diligence, to really do the research on, does this make sense? Where is the right buyer? Is the right, all of that. Like, we can't just say everybody's going to be the same thing. It's impossible. None of these will be the same. And so I think we have to recognize that some of that upfront work, it's hard work, but it's going to pay off at the end. And so I think it's hard to say, you know, same shoe for everybody.
And thanks. And I'm not, I wasn't expecting that the immigrants would be coming in with any kind of capital, but I'm kind of wondering what happens if they're there for 4 years, they've built up some equity and things just aren't working out for them, or they want to move. Are they able to cash in on that equity so that they can take their investment with them when they go? Or, you know, like, what's the exit strategy?
Very good question. It would be most common that an immigrant would come in with vesting terms on their equity. So, and this is common with executive compensation packages, it's common in the venture space, the private equity space. They would earn into an equity position over a period of years. And so if they chose to leave after, say, year 4, they might have 4/5 of their equity package vested, and that's just equity in the business. And so when they left, that would either remain as shares in the company, which are entitled to that percentage of the distributions, or we most likely would have a right to buy out that equity, which would result in a chunk of cash to the immigrant to be able to move on with their life and whatever it is, buy a house, buy a new company, etc.
Right.
They're protected as a shareholder under purchase agreements and LP agreements, and the formalization of the structure, which is, you know, it can be expensive to put in place and it can be a nuisance at times, but it affords all parties the right protections that come with these type of transactions.
Right. And if I could ask just one more question, is there a particular size of business that you're looking at, or are you looking at a range? So I'm thinking like small manufacturing firms might even fit into this, or are you looking for a sole proprietorship, or a range of everything in between?
Allison, can you show that slide again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
For sure. So the types of businesses that are a really good fit for this program are businesses that, sorry, I lost my Zoom for a second.
You got it there?
I did. There we go. So businesses that are 2 to 20 million in enterprise value and have a minimum profit of 200,000, at least 4 employees, and are in an industry that don't require provincial accreditation. So a small manufacturing plant would be perfect for a project like this.
Yeah, and we just happen to have a good anecdote on manufacturing. We bought is a manufacturing business in Ontario, small company. When we bought the company, it had 35 employees. Today we employ more than 110 people. Business is booming. There's a great culture. There's a great team. We put in place a lot of actually quite skilled and educated immigrants into this business as sort of just a case study. But like Allison said, what we really need is a critical mass of cash flow, which does 2 things. It's the living wage for the individual stepping into the business, and it's also cash flow to service the debt that comes with the transaction structure. And so there's kind of like a minimum size you can do, and then on the upper side, it's not as much a capital constraint. It's more so there's complexity as businesses get bigger, and we're pulling immigrants who may not have experience running big businesses. So we want a business that for them is the right bite size, feel comfortable to learn the functions, to be able to tackle the necessary requirements, knowing they're stepping into a new community, a new culture, language barriers, etc. We don't want to give them more than they can chew on.
And we have worked with some refugees in the past in Alberta, and we'll share the success story as well. Chelsea's on this webinar, and I'd like to shout her out for the amount of work and she's put into the project as a whole. But she actually did a success story video with Tarek, who owns the Blue Rock Gallery in Black Diamond. And so he was an employee there. We helped match him to financing. And he's just an inspiring individual in general. He was a restaurant owner in Afghanistan before he literally watched his restaurant blow up. And he's been able to transfer those business ownerships skills and really help the gallery thrive in a rural community in Alberta. So absolutely love his story, and we'll share that video as well.
Well, and that's a great way to wrap things up. Like seriously, we have a potential to make a lot more Tariq's stories possible in Alberta. So, you know, once again, we have all of these resources available on our website. We'll be sharing this recording. So if you have anyone else who says, geez, Bruce, can you tell me about it? You can share the video link with them. We'll have the resource page, so like a one pager you can share with your business community, others. And I just encourage you to do so, because I think this is a pretty unique opportunity, and thank you for your interest. And I'm looking forward to hearing some of these success stories. And thank you, Allison, your team, Garrett, for what you're doing and we're going to do. And I think unless there's any pressing urgent needs or questions, we'll wrap it up for today. So thank you very much.
Thanks.